On January 28, 2022, 2 weeks before Valentine's Day, Esmeralda Riches posted an ominous video on social media. It showed her swaying to music, and she captioned it with the words, "Apparently, I'll have to die on February 13th to get flowers for Valentine's Day." This entry turned out to be prophetic. In the early morning of February 13th, 2023, her parents found Esmeralda's lifeless body in the bathroom. The girl died because of her math and gym teacher, and although he has already been convicted, the girl's parents still don't know the perpetrator's motive. Esmeralda Riches Martinez was born on August 23, 2006, in the municipality of Igui, located in the province of Alta Gracia in the Dominican Republic. Esmeralda was the youngest daughter of Eligio Riches Castillo and Isabel Martinez Riches. There is not much information about Esmeralda's childhood. All that is known is that she grew up in a loving family with her older sister Yurimar in the community of Vista Alegre. The family had their own business, a small supermarket-like store named after their first daughter. Esmeralda spent most of her time there until she enrolled at the Cruz de Alenio Agricultural Polytechnic Institute. Esmeralda wanted to get a higher education and continue her studies, and at the same time she dreamed of connecting her life with modeling. Judging by the photos she posted on social networks, it is clear that the girl had talent. She posed like a professional model and had an attractive appearance, so she could have every chance to succeed in this field. In addition to photos, she also often posted joke and dance videos. It was clear that she enjoyed keeping a social media account and being in front of the camera. Her friends described her as a fun-loving and good-natured girl who enjoyed helping those around her, which is why many loved her. Despite her young age, Esmeralda was not a normal teenager. She did not like to go out and visit different places. Instead, she preferred to spend her time at home and invited her friends to visit, having fun with him there. However, this changed in the last few weeks before the tragic events. Once a homebody, Esmeralda abruptly began to spend time with friends outside the house and began to do so much more often than usual. This behavior seemed strange to the girl's mother and sister. Her sister Yurimar even asked her mother to put Esmeralda some boundaries, but Isabel at that moment decided that this is normal behavior for a teenager and did not do anything about it. In fact, the girl's family really should have started to worry, but not because of her friends, but because of her teacher, 35-year-old John Kelly Martinez. The man started working as a teacher after passing a teaching competition and started working on a trial basis from June 2022 at the institute where Esmeralda was already in her final year of undergraduate studies. Initially, John taught only math for the elementary courses, but he later volunteered to work as a physical education teacher and eventually began working with all groups at the university, including the one where Esmeralda was studying. What is known about John is that he was married at the time to a 31-year-old woman named J. Veronice Espinal Rijo, with whom he also had 2 daughters. John's wife was also a physical education teacher, but at a different institution. Those who knew John described him as a responsible and helpful person who got along well with most of his students, and he had a particularly good relationship with Esmeralda. Initially, their relationship did not go beyond teacher and student, but gradually the man began to take a special interest in her and gradually gained her trust. At some point during the break, John sat down with Esmeralda and her friends and began to ask strange questions for a teacher. For example, he was interested in who the girls lived with, whether they had boyfriends, and whether they had sex. Perhaps the young age of the girls did not allow them to determine that the teacher was simply bullying them. In addition, they were not the only ones who did not notice the man's strange behavior. Neither the university administration nor the students' parents noticed anything. Soon, John began to invite Esmeralda to meetings outside the institution, and in order not to arouse suspicion, invited her in the company of other female students. One such meeting took place on February 12, 2023. John planned to take a walk on the beach that evening with Esmeralda, his 20-year-old nephew Rubio Murillo Martinez, and 3 of the girl's friends. However, since Esmeralda's parents wouldn't allow her to go out at night, the girl knew her mother wouldn't let her go, so she asked John to pick her up so he could help convince her mother. The man agreed and showed up at Esmeralda's house at about 7:30 in the evening in his black Honda car, with his nephew and 3 of the girl's friends already inside with him. The whole company went into Esmeralda's house to convince her mother to let her go for a ride to a horse show that was taking place nearby. At least that was what they told her. The woman was hesitant at first to let Esmeralda go, as her father was not at home so they could make the decision together. But after a short thought, her mother decided that since her daughter would be in the company of the teacher and her classmates, nothing would happen to her, and so she let her go. She had no idea then that this night would be the beginning of the end for her daughter. In the evening, Esmeralda's father returned home after attending church, and noticing that his daughter was gone, he asked Isabel where she was. When the woman told him that she had taken her daughter for a walk, Eligio was angry, but Isabel reassured him that Esmeralda had gone with her teacher, who seemed serious and responsible. Time passed. It was 11 o'clock at night and Esmeralda still hadn't come home. Then her father called her, and surprisingly, the girl answered right away. She said she was coming back from the beach and would be there in 10 minutes. Eligio went out to wait for his daughter at the door, as she had no keys, and she arrived, as promised, a few minutes later, accompanied by a friend and John. John saw the girls off and left immediately. Esmeralda's parents noticed that the girl was a little nervous and her face was pale. In addition, she seemed to have almost no strength to walk, so her friend walked with her to bring her to her room and help her lie down. Noticing her daughter's condition, Isabel asked her if she had been drinking, at which point Esmeralda replied that she had only taken 1 sip of alcohol. This upset Isabel, at which point she reminded her daughter that she had only promised her to take a walk around the neighborhood. While the mother was very upset, Esmeralda's father began to rebuke her for coming back so late. Esmeralda's friend was originally going to spend the night at her place, but after seeing the girl's parents reprimanding her, she decided to go to her own place. In the midst of the argument, Esmeralda got out of bed to go to the bathroom, and Isabel noticed that she had blood on her sheets. When asked what it was, Esmeralda replied that she had just gotten her period. Isabel thought that was strange. She knew that her daughter had started her period a few days before, and it should be over by now, but decided not to question her further. Instead, Isabel gave Esmeralda a sedative and went to bed with her husband. In the early morning hours of February 13th, Esmeralda sent a text message to a friend asking for help, saying she was bleeding, but she never heard back. The next day, around 6 a.m., Isabel noticed that her daughter had not gotten up to go to class. So she knocked on her bedroom, thinking that the knock would wake Esmeralda up, but she was met with silence. Then Isabel and her husband decided to enter the room, and there they saw a terrible picture. The room was empty, and the whole bed was covered with blood. Frightened, they went to the bathroom and found Esmeralda lying face down in a pool of her own blood. Eligio immediately exclaimed that Esmeralda was dead. The couple immediately burst into sobs, but found the strength to call the police. The police arrived on the scene, and around 8 a.m., Esmeralda's body was taken to the National Institute of Forensic Pathology for tests to determine the cause of death. Esmeralda's family was shocked by what had happened, and although they didn't know exactly what had happened, they were sure that something bad had happened to her during that night's walk. To verify this, they checked her phone. In it, they found several messages that Esmeralda had sent to her friend. In it, she said that some hard object had been inserted into her genitals, followed by that voice message asking for help. At the time, the family did not yet know what kind of relationship Esmeralda had with John, but they immediately pointed to him as the prime suspect. The police immediately took this statement into account and began an investigation to get to the bottom of what had happened. The parents of the 3 girls who accompanied Esmeralda that night gave police officers their daughters' cell phones so that detectives could extract data relevant to the investigation. For example, investigators found several messages in which Esmeralda's friend, who drove her home that night, said she was bleeding because of the 5 pills John had given her in order for Esmeralda to have an abortion. A friend insisted that Esmeralda go to the hospital, but she refused to do so, and reports made it clear that she passed out several times in John's car on the way home. In addition, The girls' phones also contained messages from John asking about Esmeralda's condition. Based on these findings, on the morning of Tuesday, February 14th, John was arrested and taken to the police station as he was the prime suspect in the girl's death. The Ministry of Education suspended him for 90 days without pay to facilitate the investigation. John's nephew, Rubiel, was also arrested during a search of John's home. The case is that the young man had tried to hide a shirt, pants, and a pair of shoes, the clothes John was wearing that night. At the same time, Chief Prosecutor Mercedes Santana also launched an investigation into the 3 girls who accompanied Esmeralda. This testimony helped investigators reconstruct the events of that night. The girls said that at first they were just driving around the neighborhood that night, but at some point John stopped and went to a store. There he picked up several cans of beer and some pills. When he walked back to the car, he ordered Esmeralda to move from the back seat to the front seat. They then drove over 37 miles to Macau Beach, located on the coast of Barbaro. On the way, John poured beer into a thermos and threw those unknown pills in there, and then gave it to Esmeralda to drink. The girl indicated that she didn't realize there was anything in the thermos other than beer. Upon arrival at the beach, everyone got out of the car except John and Esmeralda. After half an hour, John called out to the company and said it was time to drive back, but the return trip turned into a real nightmare. Esmeralda started bleeding heavily vaginally. The girl asked to stop at a gas station to go to the bathroom, and when she was accompanied by her friends, they noticed that her clothes were stained with blood. Everyone tried to help Esmeralda, and they even had to mop the bathroom floor. So bad was the girl's bleeding. The manager of the gas station saw what was going on and said they needed to get Esmeralda to the hospital immediately. The girls went back to the car and told John about everything. He started to get nervous and told them that they might have a problem, so they needed to take Esmeralda home. One of Esmeralda's friends told them that her bleeding was so bad that the blood soaked all of the girls' clothes and they had to throw them out and buy new ones. When it was the last kilometer to Esmeralda's house, they had to make another stop, this time at the house of one of the friends, to change Esmeralda's clothes again. In connection with this testimony, the prosecutor's office obtained CCTV footage of the gas station where the girls said they went that night. They showed that the car had indeed stopped there. The manager confirmed the statements, saying that John and his nephew bought alcohol while Esmeralda went to the restroom. A few days later, the place was examined, and forensic experts did indeed find traces of human blood in the spot the girls had pointed to. Another stop was made at 10:21 p.m. at a pharmacy. Investigators were also able to obtain surveillance footage and a receipt for a purchase John had made. The receipt showed that water, medication, and disposable feminine towels were purchased at the pharmacy. While the investigation was ongoing, Esmeralda's funeral took place. Esmeralda's family and friends said goodbye to her, and at the wake they described her as a devoted and cheerful young woman. Esmeralda's sister stood by the coffin and wept inconsolably. She said that their princess passing had traumatized their family greatly. Esmeralda was buried in the municipal cemetery according to Christian customs, and during the burial, the girl's mother and father cried out to God to help them cope with the pain. Esmeralda's parents also expressed regret that their daughter did not tell them what had happened and did not seek help. They were sure that in that case the girl was alive. One of Esmeralda's aunts gave an interview in which she said that the girl's peers told her about John's inappropriate behavior, and Esmeralda's sister Yurimar noted that repeatedly asked her about her relationship with the teacher, but each time Esmeralda replied that there was nothing between them. The girl's father said that he had never seen John before that tragic evening, and noted that if he had been at home then, he would never have let his daughter go on that fatal walk. The crime against Esmeralda caused a great stir not only in the Dominican Republic, but throughout Latin America. There was a lot of speculation about the cause of the girl's death. Some said she died of a heart attack, and some were sure that she died of blood loss caused by the abortion pills John had given her after sex. All speculations were dispelled when the results of the forensic medical examination were ready. The report said that the girl died because of a ruptured vagina, which caused severe and acute bleeding, as well as hemorrhagic shock caused by sexual assault. The hemorrhagic shock eventually affected the girl's heart. It could no longer pump the right amount of blood. The doctor who performed the autopsy also insisted on a toxicology test to rule out the possibility that Esmeralda was pregnant at the time of her death. The girl's relatives were confident that the results would be negative. They believed that what happened between Esmeralda and John that night was the first and last time they had a sexual relationship. The family's lawyer, Juan Francisco Guerrero, in turn, said that despite the test results, they would demand a more thorough investigation, since the girl's family had conducted their own tests, and their results differed from those announced by the state medical examiner. Based on the evidence gathered by the police at the time, the prosecutors requested that John be remanded in custody on the charges of deprivation of life and abuse of Esmeralda. The prosecutor's office also insisted that John's nephew, Rubiel, should also be arrested as an accessory to the crime. According to the official hypothesis, John drugged Esmeralda with illegal substances that night in order to abuse her, in the process tearing her genitals, and this injury led to her death a few hours later. As for Rubiel, he was accused of knowing about the abuse and trying to hide the perpetrator's clothing. However, the lawyer for John and his nephew, Modesto Castillo, insisted that the prosecutor's office did not have enough evidence to keep both men behind bars, so he petitioned for their release. The defendant's defense tried to place the responsibility for Esmeralda's death on her parents, as the girl who accompanied her that night said that they were very angry. Nevertheless, after hearing the facts presented at the arraignment hearing, John Kelly was given a 12-month pretrial detention, his sentence to be served at the Anumay Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in Iweja. As for Rubiel, he was ordered to visit the police station at intervals, while the girls who accompanied Esmeralda that night were summoned back for a hearing to determine their degree of guilt and subsequent punishment. The court's decision reassured Esmeralda's family, but their lawyer warned them that the girl might have to be exhumed for repeated forensic tests. A few days later, the case made headlines again when an audio recording allegedly recorded by one of John's daughters began circulating on social media, in which the girl defended her father. She also claimed that Esmeralda had not been sexually assaulted, as she had gotten into John's car on her own. John's wife was also embroiled in another scandal after she sold her husband's car for 850,000 Dominican pesos, about $14,000, just after the man's arrest. On March 28th, the Alta Gracia Provincial Prosecutor's Office received confirmation that the car had been sold. She was paid by check and was to receive the remaining amount on another day. Authorities were also able to seize a Maverick 12-gauge shotgun. It had been sold to John by some woman. John's wife was eventually arrested on suspicion of accessory to the crime and concealing evidence, but was released after a few hours because the evidence against her was insufficient. The investigation continued for the next few months. The police needed to gather all possible evidence that would prove John's involvement in Esmeralda's death. When John's house was searched again, a box was found inside, which were found pills to prevent pregnancy. The active ingredient in these pills, levonorgestrel, had been found in Esmeralda's body during a toxicology test. A colored towel, brown women's pants, and a dark blue blouse were also seized from the house, as well as a white-colored napkin, pieces of blue plastic bags, and several other items. All items were sent for forensic examination, and subsequent analysis showed that the women's clothing found belonged to Esmeralda. On November 24, 2023, Judge Alexandra Reyes Custodio ordered the trial of John as the sole defendant in Esmeralda's death. The judge dismissed charges of unlawful possession of a weapon and physical assault against John. The man was to stand trial only on the charges of taking his life and sexually assaulting Esmeralda. It was up to a judge of the D.C. Collegiate Court to decide what John's punishment should be. As for Rubiel, the judge dismissed all charges against him, finding that there was insufficient evidence against him. Consequently, the prosecution and the lawyer for Esmeralda's family said they will appeal the decision. Meanwhile, attorney Joanna Rodriguez, who is in charge of Rubiel and John's defense, said that with the judge's ruling, he was given a ruling on the criminal case and issued an order of dismissal. which completely excluded Rubiel from the case. As for John Kelly, the attorney acknowledged that there were reasons for a mistrial, but she also stated that she would prove that John was not involved in Esmeralda's death. The trial was scheduled to begin on January 9, 2024, but the hearing was postponed because only half of the 53 witnesses called were present. Thus, the hearing did not start until January 15th, at which the press was not allowed to attend. The hearing began with the reading of the indictment, after which it was time for the witnesses to make their statements. Esmeralda's parents were the first to speak. They told how much they loved their daughter and how difficult this loss was for them. Esmeralda's father turned to John and said that he had dishonored his title as a teacher, because the duty of teachers was to educate and protect children. After a heartbreaking speech by Esmeralda's relatives, the defendant took the floor, and in his speech, John tried to make himself look like a victim. He admitted to having sex with her, but tried to assure the audience that everything was consensual. He also noted that when he drove Esmeralda home, she was alive and well. However, the prosecution was sure that the girl died precisely as a result of a violent sexual encounter. John had inflicted severe injuries on the girl, which were known to have resulted in massive blood loss. To prove this, the prosecution presented 40 pieces of evidence, including witness testimony and forensic reports with Esmeralda's body. During the testimony, the prosecution also had pathologists and medical examiners present, who showed the audience all the audio and video material they had managed to collect during their work, including photos and videos of Esmeralda next to John. After presenting all the evidence, the prosecution and Esmeralda's family's attorney requested a 30-year prison sentence for John. In addition, they tried to obtain an additional charge for the man, claiming that he was also guilty of torturing the girl, but this had already been ruled out earlier by the investigating judge. Finally, on March 14, 2024, the court found 36-year-old John Kelly Martinez guilty and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. The court also ordered John to pay compensation to Esmeralda's family in the amount of 2 million Dominican pesos, which is about $33,000, and a fine of 2,000 Dominican pesos, equivalent to $3,400. John will serve his sentence in Anamuya prison. After the sentence was announced, John apologized to the girl's parents and to the public for what he had done to Esmeralda. While no punishment will bring Esmeralda's parents back their daughter, the verdict for John eased their pain a little. The girl's family thanked everyone involved in the investigation and trial and said they were satisfied with the verdict. Of course, they did not feel joy at the verdict. They felt mixed emotions. They felt acute pain, cried, and screamed. The girl's family said that they will always remember her. Isabel, Esmeralda's mother, said that her daughter was cheerful, and Isabel even tried to call her several times after her death because she simply could not accept such a loss. The girl's father, for his part, revealed that he used to wake Esmeralda up every morning, but now he would never be able to do so again. Isabel and Egilo also prayed to God to give them the strength to move on, but noted that they could not forgive John. Esmeralda's story shocked many. Her life was cut short on the night of February 13th, and an incident like this should be a lesson to educational institutions that care must be taken to ensure that relationships between teachers and students are kept at a neutral level and do not cross boundaries.